your video for the recording is in progress. You can turn off your video for this first part of the conversation if you want, but you can also keep it on. It's totally up to you. But it is being recorded and stuff. So if you I don't know, want to eat lunch or something while we're doing the first part of this, definitely feel free to. I love it when people have bodies.
Wait, it looks like some of our classmates joined as attendees.
Oh, interesting. I think I'm going to, okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to promote the rest of the class to panelists. Yes, I love this power. Okay. Okay, so if you are a student of mine, for the first part of this conversation, or not the conversation, for the first part of this event, while we're doing intros and stuff, feel free to turn off your camera for now, but you are visible as part of the panel, et cetera, et cetera. So FYI. And then when we actually get to the conversation, you can participate in camera off or camera on in whatever way you feel good about. But I will make a loud announcement if and now the students of contemporary queer and trans Asian American poetry shall speak along with us. So I'll give it until 35, and then we'll get started. That sounds good. I guess I should have picked music, like elevator music from before. Do, 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 do.
What's your song? What would it be?
I always play Teresa Teng. That's like my go-to music, but it's like too late, I feel. And it's like less than a minute left before I'm gonna start talking. So, okay, I'm gonna start. Note to self, definitely have some music playing in the background next time. I'll send you a playlist, Ching-In. Okay, so hello everyone, welcome to the first event of this spring's Queer and Trans Asian American Poetry Series. Yay, or jazz hands. I'm Yanyi, lecturer in creative writing and English and the instructor for contemporary queer and trans Asian American poetry, the class which sparked this reading series. This is the first of 6 events during which we'll have the pleasure of welcoming poets, scholars, and filmmakers to the Dartmouth community. If you'd like to follow along and to peek at the reading list, you can find more info here. Cue me copying and pasting into the chat and learning that, not just panelists. So that's where you can get a little bit of the reading list and also the rest of the events that we're going to have. I'd like to give a special thank you to Catherine Gibble, who has collaborated with me in the logistics of this series every step of the way, from putting together the webinar we're in right now to marketing and making the poster for the event. I'd also like to thank the English and Creative Writing Department, particularly our chair, Andrew McCann, for his enthusiastic support of this series. So FYI, everyone, this webinar is being recorded. And if you would like to see a live transcript of our conversation and Ching-In's absolutely wonderful reading that they will grace us with, you may click on the live transcript button down there next to leave, but do not leave. Click on the transcript thing instead. I think unless I'm missing anything, I'm gonna start with the introduction. Kate, am I good? No, yes.
You're good.
Thank you. Okay, so today my students and I have the pleasure of welcoming poet and activist Ching-In Chen to Dartmouth. Ching-In Chen is a genderqueer Chinese-American hybrid writer, community organizer, and teacher. They are author of The Heart's Traffic, which is what we read in our class, and Recombinant. Is it Recombinant? Recombinant. Winner of the 2018 Lambda Literary Award for Transgender Poetry, as well as the chapbooks How to Make Black Paper Sing and Kundi Montfrekin, Information Retrieval for Monsters, finalists for the Leslie Scalapino Award. Chen is also co-editor of The Revolution Starts at Home, Confronting Intimate Violence Within Activist Communities, and Here is a Pen, an anthology of West Coast Kundimont poets. Oh, I also realized I didn't hold the books up, which I like to do. Very nice. Good books. I also have the Revolution Starts at Home. It's here, part of the ever-growing bookshelves that continue on the floor. They have received fellowships from Kundimon, Lambda, Watering Hole, Cancerat, and Imagining America, and are a part of Macondo and Voices of Our Nation's Arts Foundation writing communities. A community organizer, they have worked in Asian American communities in San Francisco, Oakland, Riverside, Boston, Milwaukee, and Houston. They are currently an assistant professor in the School of Interdisciplinary Arts and Sciences and an MFA in Creative Writing and Poetics at the University of Washington, Bothell. I think. I want to add that Chen is an admirable member of the Asian American writing community. I myself have been inspired as a young trans writer by the care of their actions and their activism work, which spills into the thoughtfulness of their craft. In fact, I find it difficult to imagine one without the other. Please join me in welcoming Ching-In Chen.
Thank you so much for inviting me and being in conversation with me. And I'm really grateful for the work that has gone into and the care that has gone into this event. And I'm really happy to be in conversation with you. I think I'm going to read some work from The Heart's Traffic and then some new work just to give you a sense of what I'm working on now. And I'm very open to, if you have questions and engagements. And also if you have, especially since you've read the book, if you have any specific pieces you'd like to hear, I'm open to that. You can put it in the chat for me. Xiaomei's first heartbreak. Gone the clanging midnight door, perpetual raised voice. Xiaomei wakes in the dew, the traffic of her heart missing. Her father did not say goodbye, or he visited her, a stealth owl dream. Either way, her memory does not appear at the short wooden door or trail her through the full streets like the older boys in the neighborhood. Her mother does not cry, but continues. Every morning, gruel, pickle, quick to school bag onto the noise of street. He disappeared into the black hole of America, an odd place with beer drinking, restaurant opening aunties, and cousins who like cereal. No letter arrives. Fob. 1. To trick or put off a person with second-rate articles, lies, excuses, etc. I knew it was a bad word by the way Jenny hurled it, hitting me full in the face. Mrs. Washington wouldn't look at me. Instead, she ordered me to look it up. I told her it meant a small pocket in the front of a pair of trousers, for carrying a watch, etc. Watch pocket, or a short ribbon or chain attached to a watch and hanging out of such a pocket. She couldn't prove me wrong. It said so on page 547. 2. To get rid of something worthless by deceit or trickery, palm off. Kathy, with the red ribbon, whose back was my landscape every morning, said hello to me in Mr. Hall's class. She asked me many questions. The word for hello, how to say pretty, egg, duck, good morning. Kathy did not talk to me if Courtney, Amanda, Jenny, and Keisha, if Arthur, Jeff, Winston. I told her ugly for pretty, quail for duck, shut up instead of good morning. I told her that her Chinese name was Kuli. 3, free on board. 4, foreign body. Cool Lee, question mark, a riddle. What an unlikely girl, an angle. What strange eyes, the calm bearer of sunglasses. What a bolt, what a length, what an unturning ear, what a dashed word-dry mouth. She's nearly a boy, what a fine mess. What this does to the girls all aflutter, how dark the night like caramel when biting into its flanks. And what an unlikely laborer. The hands work steadily through the lunch bells, never minding the hidden eyes, the mouth will come, the hand the only ear. How narrow the house where Xiaomei discovers light. And I'm gonna read the last, my planned last poem from the book, but if I didn't read something and you wanna hear it, feel free to ask in the chat. This poem is in 3 voices or 3 sections. And if you have it, you'll see that the poem has a ghost in the back. I am gonna read it in a, I guess, more linear way, but it could be read a different way if you met me again. 1, the writer. Secret. My skin peat hides under the covers, thunder god, a grandfather, both blisters. A bit apple fed to the monster who feeds. What makes an elephant? Thank hunger, make the bread. 3 is what steals and binds, what compounds in the coffee. It has less to do with me than you. What is sacred is mine in my cup. 2, the organizer. Today, we are a marshmallow before the alarm. Today, I am the waking sky composing a sandwich. Today, I am an ant making room. I am liquid and tilting books. I am the realization that saying yes to A doesn't mean saying no to M. I am creating the feeling of drinking tea at any time of the day. I am creating myself with shorn river tide at the shoulder. I am releasing my unreasonable fear of liquid bodies. I am releasing the owner of the land. I am releasing the packed train car and how we cattle each other into spider webs. I am releasing the grainy mayor. I am releasing the stranger who thinks we're the same girl because I love that girl who still sleeps when I clang the door to the world shut. I love saying goodnight to the cook shooting straight from the F train in the dawn. I love saying no to the pile as an empowered worker. I love pork and salty fish Fridays. I love that no one took credit. The rally organized itself in the horizon between the metal door and the street. I love how Auntie Joan has no cell phone and all the other women's phone numbers on speed dial in her head. I love that Xiaofeng's dream is of a blue house near blue grass rising from a steaming valley. 3, girl. I milk the sap. I brew the ailing tea. I boil. I secret my girl. I pocket my bitter vegetable like my cheek. I spark. I rim. I glow. I fire. Ants walk up and down my spine. What if digestion? I am of the frozen. I am empty of all motion. I burn down to wind. There are no chairs in my house. In my house, there are 10,000 books in a shrine. No pens because we are poor. The official visits me. I am national treasure and have to prove it. What myth is made of? If only, if lantern. Then the translators pawn their wedding jewelry for pronunciation class, plunk down into pilots, come feed. They bring notebook. They ask questions. They write and say, amongst themselves. There is no water. They say, okay, they buy Pepsi. They cannot stomach what is. There is no key, there is no key, there is no key. Milk the sap, brew the ailing tea, pocket the bitter vegetable, light the cheek, boil, secret the girl, spark, rim, glow, fire, ants walk up and down the spine. What if digestion of the frozen, empty all motion, burn down to wind? No. So that is today's visitation from the Heart's Traffic. I thought I would share some much newer work with you. And so you can kind of see what I'm thinking about or working on now. So I'm gonna read two pieces that that are from a similar time period, which is living in Texas in the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey, which is where I lived in Houston before I moved to the Pacific Northwest. And then I have a sound piece that I love to share with you as well, which I would think of as within this body of work. So I'm going to share my screen just so you can, because form in terms of the way it looks on the page is really important in my work. And just so you can see what it might look like. Can you see my screen right now?
I can, yeah.
Okay, great. And do you see breath for Guanyin? That is
Yes.
what you see. Okay. Okay, great. And just so you know, if you look at the front end, it says that there are notes for duet performance. I have this approach to reading, which is improvisational, which means that for me, reading teaches me a lot about my work, and it's a way for me to engage with, you know, the room that is around me. And so I oftentimes experiment with different ways to present the work. And so one way is that I've had other folks read with me. And so you can kind of see the indications for that. So this could be two or more voices. And then at times, you know, I also invite the audience to take a breath or have a breath response, which is marked by the tilde. So I will pause, and if you want to do it where there's that indication, I welcome you.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So when the invitation, is it to read a part or to just like literally take a breath and, you know, unmute and breathe into the poem with you?
It's to literally take a breath, like, but it doesn't have to be a regular breath, you know, whatever that means for you, whatever breath arises from you. Does that make sense?
Okay, great.
Okay.
Mhm.
Breath for Guanyin. One, brought to pond. 10,000 steps, a hum. Each cascade of yellow tile supported by sturdy red. One metal figure waiting on water. To quiet mind's battle. Metallic rain horde means fill your bathtub, cook all food, no water in grocery store, gas station line to empty. Crush of leftover white cardboard boxes, floor length. We unpack, lift boxes higher. No bathing, no showering. Do we have an axe? Question mark. A tight set of drawers in lungs. Slow a breath for ritual smoke. Open, late door, and friend a shoe on busy rack. Enter already breathing room. 100 golden figures sitting in perch, each sewn seat in neat place. Considering attic, a man walks in front of watching window. No shoes we could second. Each foot slowly, again, again. Floor it. A message says to knock on Airbnb door. 2. Man or woman? Question mark. Man or woman? Question mark. No other options at check-in. Ladies or jocks? Question mark. No time for questions. 11 size sneakers, pair of gray shorts, woman's blouse. Children's shoes. What size? Question mark. Line of eagers at distribution line all day. Rice University students writing orders. Fill big blue bags. Sort through assembly walkers, toothbrushes, pillows, blankets, a hot commodity, special line form to write. Don't you Mr. Me. I see who wanted ladies' shoes, repeating request. I'm not a mister. I'm not a mister. And no response before turning away from line toward a line of beds. Volunteer supervisor, no time for questions. I write on Post-it note, please no assumptions, please respect, please no time for questions. 3. Friend said, all the aunties chanting brought me green. One sound, 4 meanings. I enter inflection, meaning mother, not horse, meaning guide, sits, sings. Lesson from diverging mouth, chemical cloud ping-pings, a hot rushing air. All bodies in yard, humming in mind. Thick infection in head. Can't say I broke much, trying not to ingest 10,000 hurricane microbes. Let go, spider tendrils. 4. At the lost and found, eyeglasses, a credit card. Note left at desk because no cell phone. Woman in wheelchair checks in again about no cell phone. Cold box pizza. White-haired unshavens waded through waters, wants help calling FEMA from Louisiana to Katrina, lost bags, maybe at last shelter, lost daughter or son back in LA. We roll through shelter names and phone number. I inhale smoke, dial disembodied numbers to receive. Heart knows. How to attach. How to cling where the ache. Sister in empty seat. How to bring down rain. Why chant dead grandmothers into room, animals set loose in chest, only one a believer, and other a cook preparing food for hungry repentance. 5. When street drains, is there pressure in street? all notes escaping, injure, to try, not exhume breath from body. Walk away from dead night, throw arms to air, hoping for birds to land. Thank you. It was cool to hear your breaths with me.
Thank you for inviting us to do that.
Yeah. So this is, I just wanted to show you another form that was written during, it's in conversation, but in a different way. And this piece is called Lantern Letter Azuihitsu. It's written in this form, which is a Japanese hybrid form, which I've been obsessed with. And there's some examples also in the Heart's Traffic because of the fragmentation and juxtaposition. I think as a young writer, I hated form, and I could talk about the Heart's Traffic in relation to that. Because I think of the way that I entered education and how it was very narrowly presented to me. And so when I found the Zuihitsu and these kinds of forms that were very open and chaotic, it really opened up what I thought a form could be. So I wanted to show you an example of, a more recent Zuihitsu. I'm thinking about connections and kindnesses between strangers, again in Houston, Texas, and then in Seward, Alaska. And I have some lines in here from Alexis Pauline Gumb's M Archive, After the End of the World, and you can see those quotes. Oh, and I think this is an obvious, but I wrote this during a Kundiman Light Your Lantern virtual writing where we all wrote together. So so there's also that history too. Lantern Letter Azuihitsu. My people, I see you across street, porch people, huddled under brick archway, watching what pours from sky. Waiting in water, what circuits it carries, mostly numb, small, what might feel like circuits end. Stay home, watch streets filling up and draining and filling up again. My neighbor with no shoes and an umbrella knock on doors to locate whose car in the street flooding up. He knocked on our door and another one, fleeting back, knocked a few minutes before and said, "Hi, I'm your neighbor." We miss what's been paved over, all branches holding down our dirt, keeping paths flowing away. A lake and library parking lot, women calling to each other over and above it, heading to their free computer classes. My people of the flashing lights, pulsating throbs, carbon monoxide, methane, oxides of nitrogen. Cousins released 180,565 up into stream, 287,453 emissions. These are among us too, carried into our stories. If we would have only sung to find each other or taught ourselves to read the waves, if only grown resistant skin, hard fire to stand through ravenous beetles, stripping off all trees, 33 trillion gallons. What slugs, what acoustic activities, swallowed and sat, stared down with glass eyes. Vow to share our 4 teaspoons of coffee. Open back door at your knock. Lend the orange cords, handheld pumps, small towels to slick off oil anomalies. Watch for rising sheen and horizon, melting glacier, to remember its full and terrible man-eating weight, to walk through rain, down boulders, singing lines of poetry to the bears, announcing, "Hey, hey, we are here, don't worry, nothing to see, nothing to eat." If I see you coming, I vow to slow down, walk step beside you, not leave you waiting through sluck, not leave you stacked chairs high for rescue. Hundreds climb silent up the highways, looking for more silence. I'm done with fleeing. Even as you walk beside me, I feared your ever-growing branches would wild out my own tin. I kept saying thank you, nice to pass and cross and leave taking. You waited for me, the only two large clumsies under a finally darkening midnight sky, saying hello. Again, hello. I vow an impossible hello. And so the last thing, thank you. The last thing I'm going to share with you is, and I'm going to stop the share just so I can click the sound button, is a sound piece that was published in a sound showcase and in conjunction with Obsidian, which is an amazing journal edited by Juriel Harris. And
Household mutations after car.
Hold on one second, sorry. I was asked to share by Samuel A. So this is a very trans project. And the whole showcase, I think, is really interesting and amazing. So I would recommend checking it out. I can send the link.
Yes,
to you
please
all.
do. And
Yes.
Sam is so nice. Is the other
Yes.
thing. Like one of the nicest people I've ever met in the poetry community. Just shout out to Sam.
Yeah, and Sam's work is also very interesting. And Sam curated this whole sound showcase, and it's focused on queer sound. So if that's an interest of yours, or even if it isn't, I think it's really interesting to listen to the work in here. Okay.
Arminago. Text by Ching-In Chen. Performed by Ji-Yu, Ravina, Sun, Mizuki, Kendra, Ji-Yu2, in order of appearance. I am Matthew. Enjoy the show.
Household mutations. After Kamana Gote. Born a string of golden light, I invited my growing mother to new baroque bedroom. She said, who wants radioactive suitcase? Who invites one lined with silver teeth, who mirror white? Wants whale carpet scraped from mattress of maps, all roots poured with last tea. All roots spilled from me, all her nights attached to appliance, dainty shoes and rapiers. Those stains belong to me, all her shoulder leaning crease my joints. All snaps and cups shave head to a cut, all bikes and doorways remember I came to altar. To table without a fight.
Household mutations. After Carmen Nigote. Born a string of golden light, I invited my growing mother to new baroque bedroom. She said, who wants
Household
radioactive
mutations.
suitcase?
After
Who
common
invites one
ogot.
lined with silver
Born a
teeth, who mirror
string of
white?
gold light.
Wants
I
whale carpet
invited my
scraped
growing
from
mother
mattress of maps, all
to the
roots
baroque
poured with
bedroom.
last tea.
She said she
All
wants
roots spilled
radioactive
from me, all her
suitcase.
nights attached
Who
to
invites
appliance,
one
dainty
lined with
shoes and
silver teeth,
rapiers.
who mirror
Those
white?
stains belong to me,
Wants
all
whale
her
carpet
shoulder leaning
scraped
crease
from
my
mattress
joints.
of maps.
All
All
snaps and
out
cups
with
shaved head to a cut, all bikes and doorways remember I came to
all
altar.
her nights attached
To
to
table without a
appliance.
fight.
Household
White shoes
mutations.
on the beard,
After
whale
Carmen
carpet
Nigote.
stains
Born a
belong to
string
me.
of
All
golden
her
light, I
shoulder
invited my growing
crease
mother
my joints.
to new baroque
All
bedroom. She
snaps
said,
and
who
cups
wants
shave head to a
radioactive
cut, all
suitcase?
bikes and
Who invites
doorways
one lined with
I
silver
came
teeth,
to
who mirror white?
to table
Wants whale
without
carpet scraped from mattress of maps, all routes poured with last tea. All routes spilled from me, all her nights attached to appliance, dainty shoes on rapiers. Those stains belong to me, all her shoulder leaning crease my joints. All snaps and cups shave head to a cut, all bikes and doorways remember I came to altar. To table without a fight.
Household mutations. After Carmen Nigote. String-born golden eyelid, my growing mother invite to new baroque bedroom. She wants radioactive suitcase, one lined with silver teeth, mirror wants whale carpet I'd scraped from mattress of all rods poured with last tea. All rods spilled from me, all nights attached to appliance, dainty shoes and rapiers. Those stains belong all shoulder leaning crease my joint. Soul snaps shave head to a cat. I came to table to alter a fight.
Deluxe AF.
Over. Preposition.
That's it. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ching-In. So I'm going to welcome my class to turn on their cameras if they would like to, and I'm going to transition, no pun intended, to the kind of panel discussion with all of us and Ching-In. So first of all, thank you, Ching-In, for the wonderful reading. I'm gonna unpin you now, or remove that spotlight, as they say. And I figure, so for the audience who doesn't know, we're going to have this panel discussion class, and then we're gonna move into Q&A for anyone who's in the audience and who would like to ask a question. You can just click the Q&A icon down at the bottom and throw in your question, and we will get to it in the second half. I guess we'll do 10 minutes and 10 minutes, basically. And I'm gonna let my class also gather their thoughts. If there's anything that you wanted to say right now, definitely feel free to. You can raise your hand and I can call on you, or you can just speak. But I can also start the conversation and get it going before you all dive in. Sometimes it's very nerve-wracking to do that. So. Yeah,
I just wanted to say thank you for sharing all of those and in all of the different media also, like the sound piece. And I was particularly fascinated by your improvisational reading practice. Like that had never occurred to me as a possibility. And I'll have to think about it now, how to work improv into my poetry.
Yeah, I want to say that it seems so on brand for you. Of like every time I hear you read or watch you read in this case, there's always some new experiment that you're working with. And I think we had a question, like the class had a collective question about the use of form in the heart's traffic. Does anyone want to pull that up and ask that question?
Yeah, I guess the question that we had was also, thank you so much for being here. I felt so impacted by the reading of your poems, and just the sound art poem was just, wow, that was amazing. Anyway, but yeah, our class did have a question about like the thinking behind your creative process, and how did you decide which forms to challenge, and why did you decide to play with so many forms, and how that gives meaning to the work as a whole. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lily, and also Iz for that comment. So this book is, I think of it as a book that taught me how to write a story. I mean, kind of, it's non-linear in certain ways, but, and also a book that taught me how to write in forms. I think, I mentioned it a little bit, but I think my education, K through 12, I read, or I was assigned 12 Shakespeare plays. And if you can imagine that being the bulk of my writing and reading education, I had a very narrow view of what form was, and even myself as a writer, I hated poetry because I just thought it was a very narrow thing. And as I grew older and then went into community work, I saw a lot of different options that I never considered. So first through spoken word, and thinking about performance and the orality of poetry. And then as I learned about more writers, I worked with Juan Felipe Herrera, who, well, now is very well known because he was a US Poet Laureate. But when I worked with him, I thought he was very underappreciated. And his whole approach is that poetry can be everything. It can be music and dance. It has movement. It can be music. It can be a sculpture. And that really, thinking like that really opened up the door for me. So the process that I had for writing this is and I was also someone who never wrote in persona. I think I was in a really early writing class where we were assigned a persona poem, and the assignment was to write something very close to you. or to write something kind of the opposite of you. And this is actually all online before Zoom education, because it was a community class and we were all coming from different places. We didn't have any synchronous classes where we had Zoom video. So it was all via discussion board. And someone else in the class who is not Chinese or Asian American wrote this weird persona poem about this Chinese gas station worker with a lot of stereotypes. And I think I up to that point had never written in persona. And I feel like that was a challenge. I felt it as a challenge. And I think I started, developing characters and writing a persona, because I'm like, well, I never done it before. And I think for that assignment, I chose maybe like someone really close to me, like my mother, which is also very complicated, but, different in terms of entering. And so I think I think I took it as a challenge, and then I started developing a character. And so a similar thing with form is I started thinking, well, I've always thought of, for instance, the really complicated double sestina. People always told me it's impossible. You can never do it. It's like an impossible form. So then I said, well, let me use it as a way to see if I can push the story forward. So that's what ended up happening. I ended up thinking about a form that I was interested in trying out, and then kind of attaching it to this story that started developing, and then writing it forward via the form, and teaching myself how to write in the form. And what I discovered is that, form is actually really interesting in terms of how they came about, and, like all the history and culture that comes with different forms, which that's something that I don't think was taught to me in that way, So, so then I started thinking about what can this form, what can it provide to what I'm trying to do, so for instance, like the repeating forms, like the sestina and the pantoum, are really great for obsession and grief and like those really intense emotions. And then, other forms, as I talked about, the zuhitsu, like the Japanese and Eastern forms, I think really brought me something else. And one thing that I was really interested in this book, and this is thinking about heritage and lineage, is as a young child, my parents sent me to Chinese school, and we did have to memorize these poems, which I couldn't find in any, form book, but they're very uniform, and, they're very, I don't know, they're very different in terms of aesthetics. So I think I also was experimenting with that and seeing, can I also learn from that in the story?
Wow, thank you so much for that answer. I think it really shows kind of your evolution as a writer from when you were first starting out, and all these conceptions that you had about what poetry was supposed to look like or be. And what's striking to me about your engagement with form is that you actively use it to break out of something for yourself, of just the way that you talked about the double sestina just now was like, oh, well, let me try this. Let me use kind of the form as a ladder in a way toward the next part of the story that you're trying to put together. So if that's accurate for you. I think that relates a little bit to the ways that you use collaboration, or in many ways in your writing. And I was wondering if you can talk about how you came more to collaboration, and what you've experimented with recently or in the past that has driven, like the poem that you read today with Breath for Guanyin, which involved us breathing with you. So I'd love to learn more about what you're doing with that nowadays and what you're thinking about that.
Thanks for that question. So I think I've been, and especially thinking about introducing improvisation into my work, I've been really influenced by artists like Sharon Bridgeforth, who is amazing queer writer, performance artist that I would definitely recommend if you don't know her work. But so she introduced this area of work called theatrical jazz, and there are certain tenets of that practice. One being like being really attentive to who's in the room and kind of what can you do with the folks in the room, because we're never gonna be necessarily in this configuration again, or at least in this moment, right? And like how can we be attentive to us in the room and like and contributing to that work, and then and like what can it bring to the work and what can the work bring to it. So so I've been really influenced by that idea, and using what's in the room, and seeing, just seeing like what I can learn as an artist, because I think I like that approach because it teaches me a lot. It forces me to try to pay attention and be present in the room, and then it opens up the door for other possibilities that aren't there. So so there's that grounding, and then I just write a lot and have been influenced since I was a young writer by writing in with others, in community with others. So I think before I went back to grad school, I went to Kundiman, which is an Asian American, well, it started as a poetry retreat and now it's expanded to also prose writers. And that was a really important community for me because, I this class is amazing. I think, I would, as a young writer, I would have loved to be in a class like this, but I didn't have anything like this. So, so when I went to Kundiman, it was like the first time I had been in a room with all these Asian American writers, which is, I don't know what your experience is, but for me, it was terrifying, and also like amazing. It was like all these emotions at the same time. And it's legendary, like, like the opening circle, like basically they have us come together in a circle and then tell us, tell them like why we're here, or tell each other why we're here. And I feel like most people end up bawling, because it's just so much to hold, right? But like I feel like being in those spaces also taught me, because I didn't have access to like a whole range of Asian American writers, and certainly there were maybe lists that were starting, and there had been history before, but it's hard to find that sometimes, if you don't have a guide or you don't have an in. And then with, even within that wide range, I think there wasn't really queer and trans, I think, awareness of work being made. There were maybe like one anthology here, but it wasn't necessarily part of the main list, if that makes sense. And if there was a list, it might be queer, but definitely not trans. So I think, I think, looking at Kundiman now, it's also really grown. And I think it's grown through the participation of all the fellows and all the folks that have come through. And I think it's, in a way, it's not a perfect space, but it does feel like a very collaborative space that is building. And we wrote together too a lot. And that piece that I read, the lantern piece, that was a piece, and this is something I really appreciate about Kundiman, is when there have been, really challenging times, a lot of times there'll be a call out where we write together, virtually. And I feel like a lot of the things that I, for instance, do now as a teacher in the Zoom room, I learned from Kundiman, doing it way before, the pandemic, because folks are everywhere. So how can you gather together? How can you respond, when things are really hard? So they really, and I'll give a lot of credit to Sarah Gambito, who's one of the co-founders of Kundiman, and Kathy Lynn Che, who's now the executive director, because they've held a lot of this space, right, where they'll gather us together and make a ritual, and then and then we'll open up a Google Doc and kind of write together. And it's both a way to witness each other, but also kind of be influenced by each other, because, you know, there are some times where we will borrow from each other's work and kind of incorporate it into ours. So, so that's something that's really influenced me in the way that I think about how I approach my writing and writing with others.
Yeah, part of it's a fundamental, community is a fundamental part of the invitation of the work and how you design the work in the forms that you present in the writing that you do. Great.
Yeah. And I will say that I think, you know, it really, really influenced me to have that kind of space before going back to academia, because I think in a lot of academic spaces, you're not encouraged to, you know, you're not encouraged to work together. You're not encouraged to collaborate. And one of the reasons is because a lot of the rewards is for a single authorship, right? Like you have to kind of, it has to be attributed to you for you to get credit in a lot of cases. So I think, you know, my writing may have looked really different had I maybe, you know, not had those spaces. So I'm very grateful to have had that going into more school, because I feel like that was my foundation that I could return to. And I knew that this way existed.
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, you can even make that argument for the larger kind of mainstream poetry, like culture, which we could get into spicy takes around that, but we don't have to. So well, I want to open up the Q&A for also the audience to ask any questions. So I'll be watching the questions here, and I'd just like to invite students also to ask whatever comes to mind, even if it's like, just give us writing advice, because I'm sure Ching has lots of good stuff to share with you.
Yeah, what advice would you give to young writers to, like, I guess, to have that motivation to continue writing?
It's a great question that I ask myself a lot. What I would say is, I think a few years ago, I started thinking about my writing as a practice. So something that I would return to, and it being more about the process than about the product. So that thinking about it in that way. So, you know, as a way for me to kind of witness the world, or witness, you know, my own internal whatever's happening. But not necessarily forcing it to be this capitalist product of goodness, and like having to have value, you know, because that puts a lot of pressure on it. And that has really helped me. And I think one thing that's helped me is there's this, actually, I know Matthew Olsman. I don't know if he's in the room right now, but we know each other through Kundiman, and we, you know, have known each other for a long time. But he and some folks, he went to his MFA program, which is a low res program, started this thing called The Grind, which basically is a community where you commit for a month and you're supposed to write or send something to that small group via email by midnight every day. So that really, really pushed me to not be perfect, and just, you know, the whole point is accountability. It's not to get feedback, it's to do something and send it to your people. And that actually has been a really important community, which has kept me going, you know, since I was in grad school. I've been doing The Grind, I would say, just trying to think, yeah, for over 10 years, you know. And
what?
Yeah, I think so. Because I think I started doing it in grad school. I think about it. And it's really grown. When I first joined it, it was like 12 people. And I think it was only poetry. It was only new poetry. I'd write a new poem every day and send it. But now, there's like a prose, there's revised. If folks are interested, you can join. You have to know someone. It's kind of by word of mouth. But at the end of the month, I always get this email from Ross White that says, I can invite other folks. If I've completed my stuff, I can invite folks. So yeah, if folks are interested, maybe I can forward it along to your professor, and then you can sign up. So
yeah, I mean, it's hard to do that every day.
It is hard. It's hard, but I think it's a good practice to try once, because for me, it just really foregrounded the process. I had to just let go of a lot of my ego of like, actually, I also know this person teaches at Yale as well, but there was, I've been in a group with Alexander Chi a few times. And the first time that happened, I was like, oh no, I'm in a group with Alexander Chi, and he's gonna see all my like terrible writing, but I had to get over it. He's like, yeah, I have to do it every day, so send it out. Yeah. So
I think that's a great piece of advice about just not just learning how to let go of your ego around your writing, because so I feel like so much of the ego aspect of that is just all these learned ideas of what does it mean to be a good person, and the attachments that we feel around perfection. And if you're not perfect for some reason, it means that you're not in some way worthy of a lot of other things that you need, like love and care and belonging in the communities that you're a part of. So yeah, it's a great piece of advice. I think we have time for one more question. Squeeze it in.
I have a question. I know you're an organizer, and I'd really love to hear more about how that's impacted you as, like, I guess, a person and your art. Like, it's clear from some of the poems you read today that it does impact your art a lot, and I would just really like to hear more about that and like your path into organizing.
thanks for asking that. So during that time that I mentioned that I wasn't in grad school and that I was going to Kundiman, I was actually, so I worked at Asian American Resource Workshop in Boston. I also, before that, I worked at Chinese for Affirmative Action in San Francisco. So I've worked with a lot of, Asian American organizations, and I think it's really taught me a lot about, and I think also, just returning to the question about collaboration, I think it's really taught me a lot about actually my own voice and my own story and what it isn't, like what things I haven't experienced, and like what I might want to open up, in terms of like working with other people. And so the way I think about it has definitely really changed from when I started writing. So maybe from even when I was writing The Heart's Traffic to now. And I think I've also moved more towards being really interested in speculative writing, kind of reimagining the future, and doing that in teams or in community, right? Because I have to, and this has happened through a lot of my community work, have to work with other people that are really different from me, but that can create a lot of tension, but not necessarily in a negative way, in a way that pushes you to revise your ideas, your old ideas, let go of them, and kind of be open to other ideas. And so I think, the kind of work that I'm interested in doing now, is, so actually you heard a little bit of the pieces around breath. I'm really fascinated with the unit of breath. So I grew up with asthma, severe asthma. But I feel like I kind of like diminished that part and never wrote about my body or that. And then living post Hurricane Harvey, you know, there was a lot of impact around environmental pollution, air quality. So that was happening at the same time that I was thinking about breath in terms of meditation as an act of survival and care. So all those three things were going on at the same time. And at that time I was like, I need to be in conversation with others. So I took this practice that I learned from community theater days, where using this method called story circles, which actually I feel like I see a lot now recently, like circulating. And the whole idea is you just share space with others and you tell a story around a specific question. And the question is kind of open-ended, but also, you know, could be something like, tell me a story about your breathing, you know, and it's a way for folks to share space with each other, but it also can surface these important conversations that need to happen. So that's kind of the area that I'm interested in working in now, is having working with community members around community storytelling, speculative storytelling, and so both witnessing what's happening now and then moving towards, you know, like what are the possibilities for these questions in the future? You know, how can we make the world more liberatory?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a beautiful note to end on, especially with the past year and a half, really, we've had kind of contemplating and thinking about breath in relation to the pandemic and also climate change. And I kept thinking about, for my own practice in Buddhism and the breath in relation to meditation. So thank you so much, Ching-In, for being here and for sharing your work and your thoughts with us. We will be in contact, obviously, after this, but thank you so much for being here, and thank you everyone for my class and the people who are also here as attendees. This is really fantastic, and I'm gonna play outro music now, so it's like not
Yay.
awkward. You know when people say bye and it's like bye, and it's like but you can buy Ching-In's book at the Norwich Bookstore. Thank you, Kate, for putting a link here down in the chat. And feel free to add thank yous and whatnot in the room. I'll keep it, we'll keep it open for a little bit. But if you're in my class, feel free to go. Class dismissed. And thank you again to everyone.
Thank you so much. It was great to be a visitor.
Yay. Oh, yeah, the tiny claps. Yeah.